At 18, I thought I was already late. Not late for school, not late for college, not late for a job, late for life, late for success, late for becoming somebody. Every person around me seemed to have already chosen a direction while I was standing in the middle of my own life like a lost kid pretending to be confident. And the strange part was that nobody could see how scared I really was. On the outside, I looked normal. I laughed with people. I sat with friends. I acted like I had everything under control. But inside, I was watching my future slip through my fingers one ordinary day at a time. Back then, my days were all the same. Wake up late, scroll through my phone, watch other people live the life I wanted, laugh at random things that did not matter, and tell myself that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow was always my favorite lie. Tomorrow I would work harder. Tomorrow I would start something. Tomorrow I would become serious. Tomorrow I would fix my life. But tomorrow kept coming and going, and my life stayed exactly where it was. The worst part was not that I had no talent. The worst part was that I had too many dreams and no discipline. I wanted to be rich, respected, independent, strong, successful, and free. I wanted all the results, but I was not willing to pay the price. And then one day, something happened that changed everything. It was not some magical movie moment. Nobody handed me a golden opportunity. Nobody came and told me I was special. In fact, it was the opposite. It was a humiliating moment, the kind that makes your chest feel heavy and your face feel hot because you suddenly see yourself the way other people already see you. I had gone out with a few friends who were all older than me, all louder than me, and all much more convinced that life was a joke. They talked about money like it was always just one shortcut away. They talked about getting things without earning them. They talked about living fast, spending faster, and worrying later. At first, I laughed with them because that is what I always did. I wanted to belong. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to feel like I was part of something. But at some point during that day, one of them said something that hit me harder than I expected. He looked at me and said, half joking and half serious, "Bro, you're still behaving like a boy. When are you going to become a man?" Nobody laughed in the way I wanted them to. The joke landed too close to the truth. I smiled because that is what people do when they are embarrassed, but inside I felt something crack. I went silent after that. I kept walking, kept nodding, kept pretending, but that sentence stayed in my head like a stone I could not swallow. When I got home, I sat alone in my room and kept thinking about it. Not because it was insulting, but because it was accurate. I was 18 and my life looked like it belonged to someone who had given up before even starting. That night I did something I had never really done before. I looked at my life honestly. No excuses. No stories. No blaming the system, the weather, my luck, my family, my past, or the people around me. Just me. And what I saw was uncomfortable. I saw wasted time. I saw broken routines. I saw a mind full of big dreams and a body trained for comfort. I saw the version of myself that kept waiting to be saved by motivation, when what I really needed was discipline. I saw how I had been consuming other people's success instead of building my own. I saw how I wanted an exceptional life while living an average day over and over again. That was the first moment I understood something dangerous and beautiful at the same time. My life would not change because I wanted it to. It would change only when I decided to change. And that was the decision. Not the biggest decision in the world. Not a dramatic one with music playing in the background. Just a quiet, invisible decision made by one tired 18-year-old sitting in a small room with a loud heart. I decided that I was done being the person who only dreams. I decided that if I wanted a different life, I had to become a different person. I decided to stop waiting for confidence and start acting before confidence arrived. I decided that I would build something, even if it was embarrassing, even if it was slow, even if no one clapped in the beginning. The next morning I woke up and felt different. Not powerful, not transformed. Just different enough to know I could not go back to sleep inside my own life. I started small because big starts are mostly fantasy. I made a list of what I was wasting my time on and what I could replace it with. I cut down the useless scrolling. I stopped spending hours pretending to be busy. I reduced the time I spent with people who only knew how to laugh at ambition but never how to build it. That part hurt more than I expected because some people do not want your success. They want your company in their stagnation. When you begin changing, you do not just lose bad habits. You also lose certain connections, certain comfort zones, certain versions of yourself that were never meant to survive growth. At first, the silence was brutal. When I removed the noise, I had to hear my own thoughts, and those thoughts were not kind. They told me I was late. They told me I was not talented enough. They told me I had already wasted too much time. They told me that people smarter than me were already ahead, and people richer than me had better chances, and people stronger than me had better discipline. It was like my mind had become my biggest enemy. But I kept going anyway, because I had finally understood that fear does not disappear before action. Fear disappears after action. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is staying useful while fear is still talking. I remember the first thing I ever tried to learn seriously. I did not pick it because it was glamorous. I picked it because I knew it could change my life if I stayed with it long enough. I started learning skills that could actually make money, skills that could create value, skills that did not depend on waiting for anyone's permission. It was messy at first. I made mistakes constantly. I felt stupid many times. There were days when I wanted to delete everything and quit because the progress felt invisible. But invisible progress is still progress. A seed does not scream when it grows underground. A tree does not become a tree overnight. Yet it becomes one because it refuses to stop becoming. The hardest battle was not with the work itself. It was with my own impatience. I wanted fast results from slow habits. I wanted success to arrive before consistency had time to mature. I wanted to feel rewarded before I had built anything worthy of reward. That mindset almost killed me more than failure ever could. Because failure, at least, teaches you where the edge is. Impatience just makes you quit right before the breakthrough. So I kept showing up. Some days I studied when I was tired. Some days I practiced when I was frustrated. Some days I felt like I was doing everything wrong, but I kept doing it. I began to understand that life is not changed by one dramatic moment. It is changed by repeated moments that look unimportant while they are happening. The decision at 18 was not just one choice. It was the first brick in a road I had to build every day after that. One brick does not make a house. One decision does not make a destiny, but one decision can make all the next decisions possible. And let me be honest with you, because this is where most people give up. Nobody immediately claps when you start taking yourself seriously. In fact, sometimes people get uncomfortable. Some people will laugh, some will doubt you, some will secretly hope you fail because your growth exposes their excuses. When I started changing, I heard all kinds of things. You're doing too much. Relax. It will not work. This is just a phase. You are overthinking. People say those things when they cannot imagine themselves doing what you are trying to do. Their words can be loud, but they are not law. I had to learn that not every opinion deserves a response. Some opinions are just noise wearing a human face. There were nights when I felt lonely in a way I had never felt before. Not the kind of loneliness that comes from being physically alone, but the kind that comes from being mentally separated from everyone around you. I was no longer interested in wasting hours the way I used to. I was no longer excited by the same cheap entertainment. I was no longer comfortable pretending that a lazy life was enough. That made me feel like an outsider in my own circle. But slowly I realized something important. Being misunderstood by the wrong people is a necessary tax on becoming the right version of yourself. Then came the first tiny wins. Tiny wins are powerful because they are quiet. Nobody made a parade for me. Nobody announced my progress. But I started noticing that I was more focused than before. I was waking up earlier. My mind was less foggy. I was completing things instead of endlessly planning them. I was starting to trust myself, and trust is a form of self-respect. When you keep promises to yourself, even small ones, you begin to rebuild the identity you thought you lost. I could feel it happening. I was becoming someone I could rely on. And once that happens, the world starts looking different. Opportunities that once felt impossible began to feel reachable. Challenges that once looked huge began to look manageable. The same 24 hours, everyone had started feeling more valuable in my hands because I stopped treating time like an endless joke. I began to understand that most people do not fail because they are incapable. They fail because they underestimate the compound effect of ordinary discipline. 1 good day is nice. 7 good days is momentum. 30 good days is a shift. 100 good days is a new identity. Life changes when repetition becomes belief. Still, the road was not straight. There were setbacks. There were days when things did not work. There were mistakes that cost me time, energy, and confidence. There were moments when I questioned whether I had overestimated myself. There were moments when I thought maybe I was trying to become something I was not meant to be. But even those moments turned into fuel later, because every failure taught me something I could not have learned any other way. I learned that pain is not always punishment. Sometimes pain is education. Sometimes pain is the exact lesson that your comfort would have hidden from you. I remember one particularly hard night when I sat alone and asked myself a question that changed the direction of my thinking forever. What if this is not happening to me, but for me? That question did something to my mind. It shifted my perspective. Suddenly my struggles were not proof that I was failing. They were proof that I was being trained. The pressure was not there to crush me. It was there to shape me. A diamond is still a diamond before it is polished. The polishing does not create value, it reveals it. Maybe that is what was happening to me too. Maybe my hardships were not destroying my potential. Maybe they were exposing it. That realization made me more dangerous in the best way. I stopped treating discomfort like an enemy and started treating it like evidence that I was growing. I stopped needing everything to be easy. Easy had never built anything meaningful in my life. What built things was sacrifice. What built things was focus. What built things was doing the boring work while everybody else chased excitement. Success, I learned, is often just the reward for being willing to do what other people constantly postpone. The more I worked, the more I saw how life begins to respond to seriousness. Not instantly, but eventually. It is like the universe respects commitment more than wishful thinking. When you are half-hearted, life gives you half-hearted results. When you are serious, life cannot ignore you forever. I began to receive small signs that I was on the right path, a little more progress, a little more confidence, a little more proof, and proof matters. Proof is what quiets the voice in your head that says you are pretending. But even then, the biggest battle stayed internal. Because once you start improving, your old self does not go quietly. It tries to come back through comfort, temptation, laziness, and nostalgia. It tries to remind you how easy it was to waste time. It tries to convince you that one day off will not hurt, that one missed effort will not matter, that nobody is really watching. And sometimes that is true in the short term. Nobody is watching. That is why what you do in private decides what your life becomes in public. Character is built when the crowd is absent. Discipline is the ability to do the right thing when no applause is available. I had to keep reminding myself why I started. I started because I was tired of being average on purpose. I started because I was tired of being embarrassed by my own potential. I started because I wanted to look back one day and know that I did not betray my future. I started because I did not want to become the kind of man who only had stories about what he could have done. I wanted evidence. I wanted results. I wanted a life that looked like the courage I always claimed to have. And slowly, the results began to show up. Not the fantasy version of success I used to imagine, but real success. The kind that comes with stress, responsibility, late nights, unexpected problems, and strange pressure from new opportunities. Success did not make life easy. It made life worth it. It gave me something to protect. It gave me a reason to keep growing. It gave me a future worth waking up for. It gave me the first real feeling that my life was no longer just happening to me. I was participating in it. I was shaping it. Looking back now, the decision I made at 18 was not just about money or skill or status. It was about identity. It was about choosing not to remain the same person. It was about refusing to let fear write the rest of my story. It was about understanding that one honest decision can redirect an entire life. Most people think their life changes when everything around them changes. But that is not true. Your life changes when something inside you changes first. A decision becomes a direction. A direction becomes a habit. A habit becomes a future. That is why I am telling you this story the way I am. because maybe somebody watching this right now feels stuck the way I felt stuck. Maybe you are 18 or 20 or 30 or 40 and you think you have already missed your chance. Maybe you think everyone else started earlier. Maybe you think the door has closed. Maybe you think you are too behind to catch up. I know that feeling. I know how heavy it is. I know how convincing it sounds. But I also know this. Life is far more responsive to decision than to age. It is not over because you are late. It is only over when you stop deciding. And that is why I need you to take this seriously. Not just the story, not just the emotion, not just the motivational part that feels good for a minute and disappears. I mean the actual lesson. Your life will not be changed by the number of times you think about changing. It will be changed by the first real decision you make that costs you comfort. The decision to stop wasting time. The decision to learn the skill. The decision to leave the circle that is pulling you down. The decision to build instead of complain. The decision to be disciplined when nobody is forcing you. The decision to become the person your future needs. Because one decision really can change everything. It changed my habits. It changed my thinking. It changed my confidence. It changed my relationships. It changed my opportunities. It changed my self-respect. And in the end, it changed my entire life. Not all at once and not in a straight line, but enough to prove that the smallest honest decision can become the biggest turning point you will ever have. So take this as a sign, not just a story. If this message is hitting you in the chest right now, do not ignore it. Hold on to it. Let it work on you. Let it disturb your comfort a little. Let it remind you that your life is still in your hands. And before you leave, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you do not miss the next story, because there is a lot more real, raw, and useful content coming your way. I learned this the hard way, and I will never forget it. Destiny rarely changes in one giant leap. It changes the moment a person decides they are done living by accident. One decision, made sincerely, can open a door that fear kept closed for years. The moral is simple, but it can save a life. Do not wait for the perfect moment to begin your transformation, because the perfect moment is usually just a disguise for procrastination. Start where you are, with what you have, and become serious before life forces you to be. That is how an ordinary life becomes an extraordinary one.